Good morning, comrades. You are listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning, Comrade. Jeff on the show. How's everybody doing today? We are recording early in the morning. We usually record at night, so we have this, it's like this weird paradox of like this. The show's called Good Morning, Comrade. We usually record the shows at night and just broadcast them in the morning. It just stopped making sense. But anyway, we have Sam Knight's back on the show, returning champion. How you doing, homie?
Good. Have that authentic morning slowness here.
Yeah. So I was a little nervous to invite you back on because last time we had you, you basically predicted like all of the horrible things that would happen when the COVID pandemic started. I don't know if you remember, but you just sort of like lined it up, and you were just like, yeah, the economy is going to tank, and like everything is going to get messed up, and everybody's going to be like locked in their homes for months. And it was like, wow, okay, Sam was right, I guess.
Damn, I don't remember that. It's nice to start the interview hearing that I was right, because my memory of the early COVID days was podcasting with people saying, maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe it'll be just like a flu.
Well, so you specifically said not the flu part, but like the economy part.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I'm pretty much always predicting that the economy is going to crash, and I'm wrong a lot of the times. This time I was right, but even when I'm wrong, I'm basically right, because the structure is so rotten that it really could crash at any time. So
yeah, it's a very rickety old boat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I wanted to have you on the show just to talk about an article that you recently put out. It's an article in The Lever. Is it The Lever or The Lever? How's it said internally? Do you know? Lever News?
So I'm only a freelancer. I'm not privy to the pronunciation conversations. I'm pretty sure it's Lever, but it's not. It's neither. It's whatever, It's like it's however you pronounce it. It's if Rotten Tomatoes to a Brit is Rotten Tomatoes. So that's never going to change.
Yeah. And I don't want to get you mixed up into like office politics either. That sounds like it get pretty tense and controversial. So let's just leave it at that.
Well, I'm just saying, like, as the freelancer, I'm not privy to the the internal brand discussions. So,
yeah.
Lever, lever, just don't call it late for supper.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, probably about 2 years ago, we had a reporter on the show that discussed some of the human trafficking that's taking place in Georgia. We had a reporter by the name of Drew Favica come on to discuss it. He was one of the main people reporting on it. And then also we had a friend of the show, Elizabeth Strader, come on the show to talk about the sort of labor side of it, because it was farm workers with a subject of this. So I guess really quickly, because you wrote an article in The Lever or The Lever about how the upcoming Kroger's merger that people are talking about, or that is, well, actually people aren't talking about it, but people should be, because it's actually very significant. So Kroger is one of the biggest grocery store chains in the country. I guess to start us off, can you just sort of line up a little bit about the merger?
Yeah. So it was announced October 2022. I'm trying to remember that. I guess that's like about 15 months ago.
Yeah.
Albertsons is the other company involved here. So Kroger is proposing to take over Albertsons. Albertsons is also a large chain, but it is not as prominent as Kroger. And the two companies, if their merger is approved, will become the clear rival to Walmart, which is the dominant player in the grocery industry.
Uh-huh.
If you followed the merger story when it first broke when it first was proposed, there was a lot of controversy over billions in dividends that were to be paid out to Albertsons shareholders, preferred shareholders, which is to say hedge fund types and institutional investors. And there was before that, and this was I've learned this in a piece in the American Prospect, excuse me, by Maureen Kachik, that Albertsons, that one of the I can't remember what it's called at this point. Sorry, but it's one of the hedge funds that owned a lot of Albertsons shares was talking about converting its preferred shares into common shares, and it caused a little bit of a nosedive in the share price, and that was stock price. It's the same thing. Share of stock. I don't know. Well, potato. Actually, not that one. Tomato, because no one says potato.
I've never heard anybody call it a potato before.
No one has ever called it a potato. So, but anyway, the point is that the backdrop to this proposed merger is Albertsons institutional investors looking for that value for the shares that they hold. And so shortly after that, this merger was proposed. And yeah, like I said, it's aimed at creating a rival to Walmart, and it would basically leave most people in the country with even fewer choices than they have now. Walmart, Kroger. I'm trying to think of the third company that would be involved, but it basically be Walmart v. Kroger, especially in a lot of places. There are a lot of places in the West where towns will have like their main grocery stores will be a Kroger and an Albertsons, and they are to say that they are concerned about this is an understatement. And yeah, a lot. If you follow Congress, you'll notice, and you follow this story, you'll notice that a lot of lawmakers from Western states are raising the most concern about this, including Alaska's congressional delegation, which is 2/3 Republican, basically. So this is spooking a lot of people and drawing on all sorts of evidence or reasons why it's scaring them. Safeway was taken over by Albertsons not too long ago, and people have bad memories of how that merger impacted their town, and a lot of grocery workers were made redundant. And as I talk about in the story, that when there's a merger and when there's one company with huge amounts of market power in their buying products for their inputs and for their goods, they have what's called monopsony power. It's not monopoly power. Monopoly power is a single seller. Monopsony is a single buyer. And so they can really dictate prices of the goods sold to them. And that puts obviously downward pressure on prices, and that puts downward pressure on wages of workers who work these industries that supply the retailers. And we saw a lot of that with Walmart. When Walmart rose to prominence in the 2000s and such, there were a lot of news stories at the time about how suppliers were getting squeezed and they had to cut their wages and cut their costs aggressively. So I would say that's kind of the backdrop to all this. And yeah, I feel free to
No.
bring up any other aspects if I missed it.
Well, no, you mentioned the sort of the worker side of this as well, and I know that at very least UFCW and the Teamsters and perhaps some other unions are also actively organizing at Kroger. And what happens a lot of times when these mergers take place is there's job consolidations and layoffs and all these other deals, which is definitely going to have a major. We just saw, and it's a completely different industry, the merger between Microsoft and Blizzard, and they had even the UCW, the union, was essentially supportive of this merger. And unfortunately, what ended up happening last week was there was just like thousands of layoffs this past week, and I when I see this kind of stuff happen, I definitely fear for that.
Yeah, that is a big fear, and Albertsons and Kroger have made a promise that they will spin off all these stores in areas where they have this overlap. But there's also a history of these spin-offs being proposed just to placate regulators, and then the spun off stores are usually asset stripped, and whoever buys these, historically a lot of companies that will buy these spin-off stores just to rip the copper wire out of them, and people are rightly concerned that this will happen again. And yeah, the funny thing about this is that Kroger has endeavored to put a pro worker spin on this. And it is actually, I will give them credit, because it's not, you read their argument at first and you're like, oh, damn, do they have something there? Which is what they say is that, well, Kroger stores and Albertsons stores are unionized and Walmarts are not unionized. So do you want, we will be able to compete with Walmart with unionized labor. But the red flag that gets raised here is they also say that it will help them compete with Amazon. But Amazon, its foray into the grocery industry has been troubled, to say the least. It is not at all a major player. Unionized workers at grocery stores do not necessarily have to worry about Amazon stores, coming in and taking their jobs and replacing them with non-unionized stores. So that's a bit of a canard, and but it is an interesting tack that the company has chosen, and they did hire some well-heeled, high-priced lobbyists to get them through this, including John Boehner.
Oh,
yeah. So John Boehner's.
I thought he just shielded cigarettes.
Well, he I think he smokes them all day. So he's probably just chain smoking away, slamming down Merlot after Merlot, thinking of ways to get this merger over the line. So I don't think he has to think too hard.
People under 30 don't even know what we're talking about, by the way.
No. About Boehner? Oh, well, go down a Boehner hole on Wikipedia maybe one day if you want to read some interesting tales of a guy who did like to party. I'll give him that. I'm sure he still does. But yeah, I do think that, just as an aside, a quick aside, I think that the regulators are, the Federal Trade Commission is definitely taking this seriously. And under Lena Khan, the head of the agency during the Biden administration, she's been very aggressive in trying to push the boundaries of antitrust enforcement. And it hasn't always been successful, and she knew that going in. She said, "Look, we can lose, but we got to try." Um, so it's good luck to anyone challenging this, but whatever challenge they make, I'm sure it will go to where all things good go to die, aka the federal judiciary. So, I basically what I'm saying is, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, "Oh, well, maybe the merger will get stopped," probably don't think that, because if it doesn't happen, then you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Don't get your hopes up. You are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. We have freelance reporter Sam Knight, the story that he recently put in the Lever News, how Kroger's merger leads back to alleged human trafficker. So let's actually get. So you mentioned earlier the monopsony power of Kroger, or the power that emerges when you sort of have consolidation on the supplier end. I mentioned earlier that that there was a story of horrible human trafficking, specifically taking advantage of farm workers who are on these temporary visas. Sam, can you sort of talk about how these two things interact?
Oh yeah. So there are temporary non-immigrant worker visas that are given out in two classifications: the H-2A, the H-2B. H-2A is more for like hotel work, seasonal, tourist work, things like that. H-2A can be for any matter of things. H-2B is specifically just for agriculture. And it traces its history to the Bracero program, which was, if you say the Bracero program in the context of an economic historian, they'll sort of recognize it as an example of discrimination, brutal exploitation, making people into basically non-people, and exploiting the hell out of Mexican laborers. And the rationale behind the program was that it was World War II, and farms needed temporary labor to, because a lot of workers were going to work for armaments industries, if not just like straight up joining the army. But it lasted for years beyond the war, and it only was put to an end in the 60s. It was revived as the H-2B program under Reagan during immigration reform push. And it really started to explode into use in the past 2 decades. And the reason is because after 9/11, there was obviously a crackdown on undocumented immigrants, and there were raids on farms throughout the Bush years where all these undocumented farm laborers would be rounded up and arrested and deported. And so farmers really started to embrace the H-2B. Wait, I'm sorry. Did I make H-2A is the farm work. H-2B is the wow. That's embarrassing that I mixed that up. But in my defense, it's very early over here.
It's essentially like the H-2As for farm workers, just going forward.
Yes, I'm sorry. That was an embarrassing mistake. But so yeah, this program really started to explode after 9/11, and
essentially what this is temporary status for migrant workers.
Yes,
and people who don't have American citizenship.
Correct, and the status is linked to your employer. So if you at, I don't know, Apple Tree Farms hire me a Mexican laborer from, Chiapas or something.
Yeah, to pick potatoes.
Yeah, did I just say it was Apple Tree Farm and we're picking potatoes here? Okay. So, the point is that your status in the country is tied to a single employer, which gives the employer obviously a tremendous amount of power. And that power is amplified by the fact that, with the H-2B workers, you might be living in some beach town or something or working at a hotel. When you're doing migrant farm labor, you're basically on a work camp. I mean, it's by the very nature of the work. You're out on isolated in a farm. You depend on your employer for everything, for trips to the supermarket. The employer can deduct certain expenses from your paycheck, and
you don't qualify for minimum wage in most states.
Right. It's rife for abuse. And sure enough, that's basically what's been happening as a matter of course. And there are
weird how that works out when you make the conditions for abuse so very friendly, then abuse takes place. Just, funny coincidence that.
And it's, I spoke to a lot of farm labor advocates who told me that once you make the decision to be undocumented, it in many ways your living conditions are much better than an H-2A worker. If you don't like your boss, you can quit. You can even work for an entirely different industry. You go undocumented, you work on a farm.
Yeah.
And your boss is trying to coerce you into doing things you don't want to do. You can just fuck off. And can I say that on the air?
I can bleep you.
Okay, sorry. Then you can just leave, and that was unprofessional again.
I honestly understand the what you're saying is that the rules are so abusive towards immigrant laborers, the ones who are quote unquote following the rules, that it makes significantly more sense and it's much more freeing to just be an undocumented citizen and just risk it for the freaking biscuit, because otherwise you're essentially a slave.
Yep, more or less. That's a pretty good summation. And it's there have been surveys, recent surveys that have shown a third of H-2A workers describe conditions that are consistent with forced labor. They don't feel free to quit their job. A much higher percentage also report coming into the work in debt, that they are forced to take on debt to get to these job sites. And that's illegal under the program. That's illegal. It's like they're not even following what little rules that they have. And
that's what did you learn about in early American indentured servitude? Essentially,
it is indentured servitude. I mean, the debt is also a powerful tool to keep them coerced, because these workers, they'll come over and they'll hear that they're now in hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of debt, and
make no money.
They feel they have no choice, and in some cases, at least in the major human trafficking case that we're talking about here, Operation Blooming Onion, the workers not only were the workers threatened, their families back home were threatened. So it's really this all-encompassing fear.
So let's get it.
They have your advice.
Let's get into it. So one of the suppliers, essentially, and before we do that, like also this is like the literally people that like provide the food that you eat every single day. I just want to to say that like if these people don't work like this and under these conditions, at least like the way that they are, like these are the people that provide the food. If you're eating something right now that is fresh food, it is probably picked by somebody that is like not that is essentially going through the 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 this process essentially that is a part of this system.
There's a very high likelihood. I believe the number is that 1 in 10 agricultural workers are under H-2A visas in the United States at any given time.
Yeah. So
a third of which report human trafficking conditions. I mean, that's just insane to just like think about that. Like, you know, if that say that's like 3 to 5% of the entire agricultural workforce that says they're enslaved in some capacity. I mean, think about if that was in, like, for example, China or some other official U.S. enemy, like people would be shrieking that from the rooftops.
Yeah, and it's really one of these deals where I don't know, like yeah, we sort of turn up our nose at countries that don't do this, but also we create the conditions where they're absolutely necessary. The you know, I mean, again, the never-ending thirst for profit on the corporate side, and I mean, the absolute need by a lot of these suppliers, at the very least, to cut costs to keep it down, so that they can, you know, put forward, you know, or at least the argument that they make is that they need to have every right of these workers to be stripped away in order to compete. Like that creates a system where the workers are just like literally just like not even human.
Yeah. This issue, I'll have to say, studying this issue and reporting on this issue has got me really interested in land reform. But I still have yet to delve into studies on land reform. I just like to say, like, when I think about this and like what's the solution, like I feel like the real solution is to let the workers own the land that they work.
Oh. Yeah, okay. I like that.
Anyway,
yeah. Well, you're listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. GoodMorningComrade.com. Sam Knight on the show.
Good morning, New Orleans.
Good morning.
Hope you're enjoying your chicory coffee and your powdered donuts.
Beignets, you mean?
Yes.
So, just to sort of like get into specific of Southern Press. Can you describe so this is one of Southern Press is one of the suppliers. Can you talk about them a little bit?
So Southern Press is a grower and a manufacturer of blueberry juice, and they are also a Kroger has over the years touted its partnership with Southern Press. They're based in Blackshear, Georgia, in the southeastern part of the state, closer to Jacksonville than Atlanta.
Basically Florida.
It was formerly, as I understand it, tobacco country. And then, people's personal preferences started to change as it became more clear that cigarettes are definitely bad for you, even though maybe they make you look cool. But so basically, this part of the state switched from tobacco production to blueberry production, which has been, I would say, a net positive for people.
Blueberries look cool.
Blueberries also make you look cool, and they don't kill you. I mean, I guess unless you ate like a whole bunch of them and had some tummy problems, but that's a skill issue at that point. So where was I? Right. Southern Press, a blueberry grower and manufacturer. Kroger has touted its relationship with Southern Press over the years. They're one of their local partners that they like to highlight. And Southern Press's CEO was in a Kroger ad that honestly, I'm not sure if it aired on any TV stations. It looks like it has in terms of its production, but it's on YouTube. And
Yeah.
I want to be clear here, maybe take a step back and say that when I set out to write this article, I had no intention of writing about the Kroger merger. What I did was um, I started looking into companies registered by or with the involvement of the lead defendant in the case, this major human trafficking case,
Mhm.
and then I plugged those companies into the Department of Labor seasonal jobs database to see who was hiring this who was contracting with these women's companies, and one of them was Southern Press, and that started then I started searching around for other, information about Southern Press, and found learned about Kroger's history with them, and it was to the point where in September, Kroger issued a press release defending defending the Albertsons merger by saying if the merger goes through, we will increase local produce on our store shelves by 10%. And they rattled off a list of, their cherished, preferred, some of their local partners. And one of them was Southern Press. So I thought, whoa, okay. Kroger is promoting its merger by touting its relationship with Southern Press, who, according to public records, hired Maria Leticia Patricio, which is like, I'm not an expert in corporate PR, but I will say that if you are trying to win over the public by on some controversial issue, you might not want to tout a partner that, according to records, has used the lead defendant in the biggest human trafficking case to come out of the United States in a long time. So that is sort of the Southern Press intrigue here.
Mhm. So they're contracting with Maria Leticia Patricio's company, and Leticia Patricio is named or is the contractor that had this huge human trafficking issue, essentially.
Yes, according to federal prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that she has pleaded not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
However, she was indicted with 22 others, I want to say. I think 23 were indicted overall. The initial indictment was 24, but one of the co-defendants, it turned out, was actually dead.
No.
So they took him off the indictment. And four of the people who were indicted with Patricio have already pleaded guilty.
Uh-huh.
And three people in a related case that preceded the Patricio indictment also pleaded guilty. Which is to say that the facts don't look good for the defendant in this case. Or just like the basic, developments, so to speak. Not to mention the fact that the prosecutor, and none of this made the article because obviously, like, when you write an article, a lot gets on the cutting room floor. But one of the issues in the case, which is obviously still ongoing, it hasn't even, the trial hasn't even started yet. And one of the issues there is that the discovery process is taking a long time, which is to say that prosecutors have a lot of evidence
Yeah.
that they need to go over and then share with the defendants before, proceeding to trial.
Uh-huh.
So, never went to law school, but I would say that if prosecutors are like having trouble sorting through the mountains of evidence they have against you, that it doesn't look good for you.
Not looking good. Not looking good. So as far
Yeah.
as like, as far as this in terms of any potential impact or any kind of like way that this could affect the merger, do you maybe like, I don't know, maybe this is like a inappropriate question, but do you sort of predict this being an issue for this merger here?
So I know that regulators, in their effort to scrutinize this, have been looking at all matters of issues, including agricultural issues. And the California's Attorney General Rob Bonta, who's looking into this, has said he's concerned about the impact on the state's agricultural industry. The Federal Trade Commission, in its novel approach to antitrust, has said that we can sue to try to stop any merger where there's an anti-competitive impact on the labor market. So it's possible that this will in some ways color what goes forward. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. And maybe I shouldn't be the one to guess whether it does or
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
as the author of this. But yeah, I mean, going into it, broadly speaking, like agriculture and labor markets have been scrutinized with regards to this merger. A lot of it focusing on the retail workers, which, for obvious reasons. So I don't know. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
will say that the decision was initially FTC's decision on whether or not to sue to try to stop this. It was supposed to have come out already, and it has been delayed. So I don't know. That's another interesting wrinkle in this, but
It might have something to do with this case, but like that might just be speculation as well. That's
I
interesting.
mean, it's also just such a huge merger that I'm sure there are tons of issues that they're going over. So as a matter of course, it likely, would have been delayed anyway. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I will say though, to build off something I said earlier, is that even if the FTC invokes this and a whole bunch of other issues in a very well thought out challenge of this merger, that the federal courts might just laugh at it because it's the federal courts. They, what do you expect from them?
Well, federal courts are almost entirely, well, not almost entirely, but very heavily occupied by Trump appointees, right?
Well, certainly at the higher levels,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not even sure to the extent. Democratic appointees, I don't think, are necessarily that great on antitrust,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's true.
it seems like it's one of those issues where courts are reluctant to weigh in and to stop anything. So, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? The future is unwritten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned also some other suppliers that had labor law violations as well that were a part of this Kroger merger. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there have been several cases in recent years where Kroger, where suppliers will be accused of wage and hour violations to straight up human trafficking, and there have been three cases where they each involve a Kroger supplier, and not necessarily just a Kroger supplier, but it's an emerging pattern where, you know, you see one after the other Kroger supplier accused of really heinous crimes, and in one case, it's led to in a forced labor human trafficking case, it led to convictions. So, farm worker advocates have been critical of Kroger for some time for its policies, especially because anyone who's been, following farm labor issues in the United States for a while, most people are probably familiar with a group called the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. They've organized farm laborers to get growers to agree to basic minimum standards of treatment, where, to basically root out human trafficking, to pay living wages or something more approximating a living wage. And that work in the 90s and 2000s led to the creation of something called the Fair Food Program, which was sort of a standardization of these contracts and of the basic, terms that farm laborers are entitled to under these deals. And there have been some very large corporations who one doesn't think are friendly to labor, but have still agreed to these basic standards in this program. Among them, Walmart, synonymous with visceral hatred of organized labor. Trader Joe's, also a member of the Fair Food Program. Trader Joe's literally just sued to try to have the National Labor Relations Act thrown out as unconstitutional, following in Elon Musk's footsteps. Oh. So this is to say that, other corporations who by no means have been considered friends of labor have agreed to this program. And Kroger, when asked about it, they're not having it at all. And in one episode that I mentioned in the story, there were activists, investors, who buy shares of companies and try to use it to force through socially progressive change and such, worker-friendly such, et cetera, et cetera. And so they wanted to propose at a recent shareholder meeting, that Kroger should join the Fair Food Program. And Kroger did not let the vote happen and asked permission from the SEC to exclude the proposal from its shareholder convention. And the SEC said, yeah, that's fine. This is the rule is like, oh, this is micromanaging the company or something. Yeah. And so Kroger is pretty insistent that it wants nothing to do with the Fair Food Program. And the funny thing is, you can see why companies that are hostile to labor join the Fair Food Program just by looking at this recent history of Kroger and these suppliers that get caught up in these labor law violations. It's, companies join the Fair Food Program because they don't want to be sued for facilitating human trafficking.
Right. And it's something that keeps the current model sustainable. It's like reforms to keep the model going, which is opposed to anything that's going to upset the potato cart.
Right. And to be clear, the Fair Food Program gives a lot of really good material benefits to workers who would otherwise lack it. And it's a
good thing. It's a good thing. I'm not trying to say it's not a good thing.
No,
for the workers, but like structurally speaking, it's not undermining it either, is what I'm trying.
Right. I mean, it does. it does give the workers some muscle and some teeth, right? Like they get workers' rights training on the job, on the clock. They get uh, access to a complaint line, a 24-hour hotline that they can call at any time and have their issues resolved in a sort of non-confrontational, like, anonymous, you don't lose your job kind of way, but, we'll remediate your workplace kind of thing. So it obviously does provide some real tangible life improving benefits to these workers. But as you said, yeah, it doesn't, it's not a threat to
They're not inviting.
capital.
They're not inviting the United Farm Workers in and be like, "Hey, you just organize our people."
Right. But it does operate in a union like sort of way.
Sure.
And
A service capacity.
yes, but yeah, and Kroger has really has shown a lot of hostility to the idea of even joining the program.
Yeah, that's really. I think that's really interesting. You brought something up that I didn't. I mean, I guess it does make sense to me now that I think about it, but I didn't know that was a thing that like, I guess holders of capital would do. They would just like activist capitalists, as you sort of mentioned, and they would just go in and buy parts of companies and attempt to implement essentially social reforms on them. That's a phenomenon I'm not actually super familiar with.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it was bigger, like 20 years ago, shareholder activism, maybe not. I think Ralph Nader was big into that for a while. And, I think that I don't necessarily, I don't know.
They're not the enemy, but like the incentives are just not there to do that. It's all there's a limited sort of I guess limited sort of like you can only go so far with it.
I certainly don't begrudge people for trying it, but yeah, insofar as like the land reform issue that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Buying 5% of Archer Daniels Midland and being like, what if we redistributed the land in 10-acre parcels or whatever.
Yeah. But anyway, so just to sort of, you're listening to WHIV LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade, goodmorningcomrade.com. And I mean, again, this is also something that's not like, I don't know. Kroger makes billions of dollars a year in profit, right? And implementing the fair food system or any of these other sort of like reforms that you mentioned is not something that would break them, would it?
No, obviously, no, of course not. I mean, it's just a, I don't need to tell you that bosses just like to have total control.
Right.
And, I'm sure they look at this as something that's restricting to them, restrictive, and, based on the brutal exploitation that happens in farm labor, they correctly view that they can manage their costs better by, having more of a worker unfriendly approach, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's going to essentially this
and switching from various suppliers and like being able to, like, part of the reason that it's hard to root out abusive contractors in the industry is, I think, is it's very easy for retailers, big name retailers, to just quietly switch from one supplier to another. Right. And you'll see cases in farm labor where some farm labor contractor gets debarred from the H-2A system, And so they have like a family member register another company, and like what changes?
That
Only
that
only
literally
putting
happened
on
in
paper.
that literally happened in the Georgia case as well.
Yes, it did. Yes.
Yeah, totally. And that's like that is how a lot of these abuses and a lot of these, yeah, like you mentioned, debarring or whatever, kind of like the system perpetuates, because it's not these are contracting companies. They're like literally you go there, you file for the LLC, and you find some people and you hire them and you say, pick X number of potatoes and
And Maria Leticia Patricio had like, you know, I want to say over a dozen LLCs on the Georgia state database alone. If not, I think it had been a while since I've looked on the database, but I think that's understating it. More like 2 dozen. She had a lot of companies.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's a system that, like, I don't know, the reform of that is not looking very good, and things like the Kroger Albertsons merger does not seem to be heading that into any better of a direction.
No, and I will say the Department of Labor, like a lot of this comes down. One of the reasons why a lot of this goes on is DOL Wage and Hour Division just is not given the resources that it would need by Congress to prosecute a lot of these cases. So a lot of these farmers rightly know that if they can abuse the hell out of their workers, and no one is going to stop them, even if it's like hella illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Sorry, that was a gratuitous hella. I shouldn't have said that.
it's all right. Hella.
I'm not even from California, so
I think you can say hella on radio though.
yeah. And I know it's not like a censorship. It's just kind of like, I don't know, maybe not a word that people are still using in 2024.
Does that just mean you're old?
I guess so. I like hella.
I think it's good. I'm not. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna put the screws to you for it.
I'm not trying to steal Oakland valor, though.
Uh, there, Oakland's doing well. Actually, no, the other side of the bay is doing good right now with the Niners. But the Oakland. Oh, actually, no, they don't even have a team anymore. Now, the Niners own them all. We have the whole thing.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're talking about the sport that Taylor Swift's boyfriend plays.
That's right. Yeah. Well, anyway, as we sort of wind down, anything else you want to sort of touch on that we didn't get to that you wanted to on this article?
I don't know if I do. I think we covered a lot of ground here. Yeah, just a general exhortation to your listeners to keep the farm workers struggle in the forefront of your consciousness, because so much of this flies under the radar. And even though we're talking about this case as like the biggest human trafficking case to come out of the United States in a long time, I would venture to say like maybe 1 in 10,000 people may have heard of it. I don't know. It's just that the farm workers are so abused in this country that people just get accustomed to it and sort of think that it's just normal. That's just how it is. It's no more unnatural than the air we breathe and the water we drink, and that's far from the truth. And it really exposes the ugly nature of the United States, of the economic system here. And it really drives home that, people are not just being brutally exploited in other countries. It's happening here. It's happening on a systemic scale. And, people just need to really, in my opinion, really like keep the farmer struggle at the forefront of their mind, because it's awful. It's It's unacceptable. It's a national shame, and it's got to change. Like it's a moral imperative to really change this system, and we need people, especially people in labor, talking about it. I mean, anyone who's familiar with the history of labor rights in this country knows that, and maybe this is the thing that I wanted to bring up, but didn't, that farm workers have been sold out time and time again. Most shamefully, when the National Labor Relations Act was passed, in 1935, and the Roosevelt administration and Democrats in Congress just said, "Oh, we got to carve out farm workers to not upset the segregationist Democrats in the South." So that is the reason why farm workers and domestic workers are not included in the NLRA, is because of Jim Crow. Right. And what we're seeing here is a vestige of Jim Crow. Like, the reason, really, when it comes down to it, that these human trafficking cases are, that this system is basically allowed to be built on human trafficking in some capacity is because of, we have not fully grappled with our history of systemic racism and what that means on a real material level for the working class.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, again, just to sort of like sum that up, this is a very direct and glaring example of what happens when a policy decision or a policy concession is made to essentially racists.
Yes. And I don't even know what the breakdown in Congress was then in terms of the vote. Like, did they even have to do this to get the NLRA passed? Like, the 30s, like, Democrats had some huge numbers after Roosevelt was elected in the 30s. Like, did they even have to do this? And maybe I should have done a little more research before rhetorically asking that question on the air. But, yes, it is an example of the long-term effect of triangulating away and making concessions to awful reactionaries. It will literally haunt you for 90 years.
Yeah, or longer.
90 years and counting.
Yeah.
Almost 90 years and counting.
Well, yeah. Sam, what can we find more of your work? What have you been up to? Tell us about what you're doing.
I would suggest, if you want to read my work, you can search Sam Knight on either truthout.org or levernews. Oh my gosh, it's levernews.com. And also, I have some work in Dollars and Cents, which is a great publication, especially if you are like me and you studied economics, but you studied it because you were appalled by the way that the economic system is structured and justifications for it. And you heard all these insufferable economics profs drone on and on and on about how misery is really the only way it can be.
Yeah. That's what supply and demand means.
Yes. So Dollars and Cents is this great publication that covers economics, but from a critical, left sort of, analytical framework, and for lack of a better term. And I have a piece out there recently, and I'm working on another right now that will be out in the February-March issue.
Okay, cool. Well, if you want to come on the show and talk about it when it comes out, hit me up.
Yeah, I might.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sam Knight. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Good Morning Comrade. You can listen to us every week on Saturday at 10 a.m. on 102.3 WHIV FM in New Orleans. You can also go to our website about listening to back episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Sam. We love you. Bye-bye.